Another coach that I've heard rumblings about being on the radar is current Wake Forest coach Steve Forbes. That might surprise some people because that some people would consider that a lateral move, but I honestly think that would be a great move for Steve Forbes. He'd go to West Virginia where he likely has better NIL opportunities. I don't know the details about NIL at Wake Forest, but from what I've read and heard, it's not very good. They have a small student enrollment there. It's an really high academic institution. I'm not sure how seriously they take their sports there in this day and time. I think he could come to West Virginia, a school that really takes their basketball seriously, passionate fan base, and he could play in what's arguably the best conference in the country in the Big 12. And when you look at Steve Forbes' record, since he's been at Wake Forest, he's coached 3 seasons there. His overall record is 50-39, which doesn't blow you away, but you got to remember the first year he took over there, they were a dumpster fire. So obviously he struggled. He was 6-16 in his first year, which was the COVID year, and then in 21-22 he flipped all the way went from a 6-win team to a 25-win team in 1 year. In 21-22, and then this past season they finished 19-13. So he's had success there, but his great success was at East Tennessee State, where he spent 4 years. His overall record there is 130-43, 75% winning percentage. So, Paul, what's your thoughts on a coach like Steve Forbes?
I think he's a guy that has, he doesn't have as tight of a resume as some of these other guys. But obviously what you noted there about the flip was impressive. Definitely Wake Forest is, first of all, they're in a hotbed of basketball recruiting right there in the South and the North Carolina area, the Alabama area, the Florida area. A lot of really good basketball down in that area, but also not so far away, and also the other place he was at from, close to the area where West Virginia would need to recruit. I think taking into account some of these coaches' former geographic footprint would be important to also consider when hiring these coaches. If they have no idea, or no connections, obviously the transfer portal era, maybe that matters a lot less, but I still think it's something that needs to be noted and considered. And Forbes definitely fits that description. He's had success. That's something we need. Yeah. And he's also a younger guy. So, he's not a John Beilein as far as being 71 years old.
Right.
Or even a Jay Wright, 61.
Yeah.
So I think that's also important because, the one thing that is leaked out of Morgantown from several different sources, as far as you can read them online, all the way from Andy Katz to Jeff Goodman to others, is that Rim Baker is hiring for the future. That is the number one thing that's coming to Morgantown that I think has some substance to it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this guy, would fit that mold. And one guy that might fit that mold, actually two of them, but one guy that might fit the future mold more than any of them, because he's really young, he's actually 42 years old, same age as me, is Ben McCollum. This is a name that's gained a lot of steam. He's the current coach at a Division II school called Northwest Missouri State. But they're not just any Division II school. He's basically built a dynasty there. They have won 4 national championships in the last 6 years.
And one of them was a canceled season.
Right. And he's won, yeah, exactly. And he's won Coach of the Year award 5 times. He's had multiple opportunities to get better jobs, and he continues to turn them down because, and Paul and I both watched an interview on this guy that this guy did with Andy Katz on the NABC show on YouTube. Go check it out. He's very picky about what jobs he takes. He did say he does want to meet bigger challenges at some point in his career, but it has to be the right opportunity. He's not just going to leave for money, and he doesn't have an ego issue to where he has to coach Division I basketball. For him, it's all about the fit. And what I liked about it, he said, I want to make difference in young men's lives, and I look for opportunities to do that. And I thought, dude, Morgantown is the perfect place to do that, in my opinion. But just give us your thoughts real quick on Ben McCollum. Do you think overall, and then also, do you think jumping from the Division II all the way directly to Power 5 would be a big ask?
I wish I would have, we've been so busy, dude. I wish we would have sat down, or I would have sat down and looked at more of that, see how many coaches have jumped from there to
Right.
Power Five and been successful. Sorry, guys. Usually I would have a comparison like that ready for you. These are a lot of names on this list, and it's hard to prepare for it's a monster to really think about all the names and try to remember everything. But as far as Ben McCollum goes, this is a guy that's had one incredible run. You could make a case he's been the most successful coach in all of basketball over the last, say, 10 years. I think there's a lot to be said about that. And were we not in the NIL era slash, collectives era, I think he would be a slam dunk kind of pick. Yeah, I've heard him speak. I like his leadership skills and abilities. Love his heart and what he talks about is important to him. And it's not ego driven. He will say that himself. But the biggest negative for me personally, and this is something that I hope Rim Baker considers, is he has absolutely no experience at all with NIL, with collectives, with the transfer portal market. He even said himself, they have no transfers on their team that just won a title. And it's not something that he's very used to doing. So the learning curve for that would be extremely steep, and it's something I'll be extremely worried about. The other thing I worry about is, I always wonder about a coach's eyes. When you go from a place like where he's at now to West Virginia, I'm sure Josiah, Seth, guys like that would look elite compared to probably some of the players he has on his team right now. Not that they're not a good team, but individually they probably don't have too many elite players. And I just wonder how a coach.
He does have one guy who's in the NBA right now,
Right?
but that's one out of, and he's been there for over a decade. So
right. I just worry about his eyes and how does he judge talent?
Right.
And I mean, I know he has an idea for what fits his system, and maybe he just scales that up and does the same thing in Morgantown. But as far as concerns go, my only one is, first of all, geographic footprint. He's never coached that I know of close to our area, which may not matter as much in the portal era. And number two is the portal era, and somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience with it. How does he transfer?
Yeah.
I think there's a valid concerns, and I think Rim Baker probably is judging the entirety of all that while he makes a decision.
Yeah, honestly, in my opinion, I like this name when I first heard about it, and man, the titles he's won, but the more thought I give it, jumping from Division II all the way to Power 5. I mean, you're basically skipping a step when you do that, because you're skipping the mid-major level or the low major level even. I mean, take John Beilein, for example. He went from Canisius to Richmond to West Virginia to Michigan. Now I would say West Virginia, Michigan is closer to a lateral move, but
look at Bob Huggins.
He took it in steps, right? Bob Huggins, same thing. Akron.
Walsh, Akron.
Walsh, Akron, Cincinnati, West Virginia. I mean, that's the typical. I mean, obviously, Joe Mazzulla just skipped it all and went straight to the NBA, which is, again, that is just
says unreal. Something about him.
That's your typical. And doing research for this video, most of these coaches did the same thing. The guy I mentioned earlier, Steve Forbes, he was at a couple small schools. I think one was called Barton College or something. Then he went to East Tennessee State. Then he went to Wake Forest. I mean, that is your typical progression of coaches. And I'm not saying Ben McCollum can't be another Joe Mazzulla and skip a step. Maybe he can. But I just think it's really, really risky to do that. Because, keep in mind, Joe Mazzulla was an assistant in the NBA for a couple of years first. So he at least had a couple of years to learn the NBA landscape before he became the head guy. You know what I'm saying? So absolutely. I don't know, man. I just think, to me, skipping one direct from D2 to Power 5 to me would be a huge risk. And I'm not sure the donors would go for it, number one, if that's a concern for Ren. And number two, I just think it'd be too risky. And I think you might risk losing everybody on this roster, or at least the majority of them. Well, guys, let us know what you think about these coaches on our list. Do you think any of these are legit candidates? And which one do you think is the most likely, if any, to get the call from A.D. Renbaker at West Virginia to be the next head man for the West Virginia basketball program? Guys, don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to sub us up. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to drop that comment below. like I mentioned, and share it out with your friends, guys. Let them know about Hoops from the Hills because we're trying to get to 1,000 subs. We're getting closer and closer and closer, but we need you to share it out and let people know about us here to help us grow. With that being said, guys, we want to thank you for tuning into this episode. The show is over, and we are out.